Greetings. Welcome to our wonderful Small Farmers Conference. We're so excited to have the opportunity to be able to speak to you today. Today, I'm going to be dealing with disaster preparedness for Mother Nature and COVID. Oh, they're a tag team together. So get set and enjoy what we're going to present. Today, we know that there's a lot of things are taking place around us. Disasters affects our livestock. It affects our properties. And it truly affects humans. And so today we want to make sure we're in the best position to prepare ourselves and embrace ourselves for what Mother Nature may bring. We never know because she's full of surprises. And so we want to empower you today and enrich you with tips and things that will help you equip yourself. So today, my name is Gil Finley. I am the State Specialist for Community Economic Development, also known as Community Resource Development, here at Kentucky State, and have the opportunity to be able to bring some vital information to you. Today, my objective is to be able to give you tips and on preparedness and activities and things that will cultivate plans, things you should use as far as your kits to use prior to disasters or emergencies to support you and to help minimize loss, whether it's property or life. So let's just talk today in a summation. Natural disasters are events that happen. There are things that Mother Nature throws at us that come, such as floods or earthquakes or hurricanes, or these things that create great loss, maybe mudslides or earthquakes or I said that fire, snow, just whatever season brings a different element to be able to bring us into a place of submission by the elements. And so with that, we've even noticed that over the last 30 years, because of these particular disasters, that we have really had a crisis in food from these disasters, tripling what we've had over the last 30 years as far as food and the depletion of food. Man-made disasters are different. Basically, it's the human element of neglect or error involving the failure of a human man-made system or a system constructed by humans that basically result in failure and neglect and basically creates these results of disaster opposed to natural hazards that are created by Mother Nature. When we look at these man-made disasters, we're looking at things such as arson. These are crimes or oil spills or terrorism. And we have civic disorder right now, and that's something we all can relate to. And we have terrorism, war, or biological chemical threats. That's a big one because people all over the globe are concerned about who's going to push the buttons or release these things that can take massive amounts of life out, creating these havoc disasters. And another one that we really don't talk about that we really need to look into is the cyber attacks, because everything's so electronically inclined. We have satellites above us and those things that are transmitted up and down. If those things go out or these power grids go out, we're in major loss, and because a lot of things that we have are inclined to be dependent upon them. No matter about the disasters, wherever they are, however they start, whether they start in your local area, they can evolve into a state emergency which affects everyone. One of my biggest sayings is that disasters don't discriminate. They affect us all. They have no boundaries. They don't care who's rich or poor or where you come from or where you're living. When they come, they affect us all. So we're going to go into depth today and talk about some of the things that happened in Kentucky. A blizzard in 1993 happened. 300 people died because of over 20 inches of snow that came into the Appalachia area, and it took lives out. It incapacitated them, meaning they were not mobile. Can you imagine 20 inches of snow, what they can do for Kentucky with farmers, with livestock, those kind of things? There are some states that are prepared for that, but as far as in Kentucky, it actually had a dramatic effect. When we talk about ice storms in 2009, we actually had one at that particular time, one of the worst natural disasters there because it paralyzed the whole state. And actually we had, because of the ice, and we had so many electronical power lines down, electric lines, and we had massive cleanup for days and weeks. People were without electric for weeks. So when we think of that, we think of Kentucky. When we talk about the ice storms, when we talk about Pike County, we're talking about flood in 2010, 2 lives lost. The officials in that time claimed that it was the worst damage they had seen in many years, and that took lives. And we continuously have flooding within our state due to the uncontrollable rains. And then one of the biggest ones that we have quite frequently in the state of Kentucky is our tornadoes. In 2012, early March, we had 4 tornadoes to touch down. It was the worst in the region in 24 years. Basically, the National Weather Service talked about it. We had winds that hit up to 160 miles an hour, took 36 lives, and it crossed 5 states. These are things that actually come as Mother Nature releases her wrath sometimes, whether it's things we're prepared for or things we're not prepared for. It comes and it finds us to be vulnerable. So we're just looking at a few things that happens in our state. But as we go, we recently have things that come up and affect from a disaster from a local county into a state emergency or a state disaster. Recently, our President Donald Trump approved Kentucky for disasters and make a declaration on March the 28th. One of the things that happened that we may or may not remember was when our Kentucky had severe storms back in February, and it created massive flooding. And then it also, which we don't normally hear of this, is landslides and mudslides. We normally hear about these type of activities in California or the other areas, but outside of our states. But it actually, it was an actual state declaration given by our president. Now we know the next animal, I will call it an animal, is COVID-19. A pandemic worldwide actually created a disaster here in Kentucky, and the president declared that it is a state declaration as a disaster. And even again, COVID-19 also is continued to be on our radar as we continue to progress. Now we're getting into the cool months. We're ready to go into the winter months. And there's advice about being able to watch out for these possible spikes and making sure that we take the proper procedures to prepare ourselves so we're not part of this actual pandemic and we don't suffer disaster. So as we look at Kentucky, one of the things that's happened between Mother Nature and COVID is these things attack and they come, and we have to be ready. So one of the things we want to talk about, how to be prepared, as one of the key things in preparedness is a priority, is basically watching the weather advisory. A lot of times we do. Most of you farmers probably have to do it more so than folks that are not actually farmers, but depending on the occupation, we want to know that we're getting ready to get into the winter season. As you view this, temperatures will be changing dramatically between now and the time in which you see this, as well as those times that you're in. So frost, basically you'll be having these patches of frost based upon how the temperature drops within a certain region or a demographic area. So when we'll look at that, we'll look at freezing temperatures and how these freezing temperatures change, how they fluctuate based upon what's going on in the conditions of the climate. Then we get into snow, then we can get into possible blizzards, and then after that we have to deal with the flooding situation. So when we're looking at this, we want to look at the outlook, and this is those who are forecasting from our National Weather Service telling us, hey, listen, watch out, be on the lookout, and they're giving a percentage that they're confident in this, and the confidence of 30%. 30% means be on the watch out, look out, this could formulate, this could arise, this can come up, and it actually could be in your actual backyard. So when we hear watch, it means 50% confident or have confidence that these things have developed and we see these patterns, and this historically is what we calculate or we see formulating at the time headed your way and it's coming to you. So watching is at 50%. But now when we get into what's known as advisory, it's telling you to take the actual action, get ready, 80% confidence that these things have developed and they're coming your way, and you better be ready to be able to handle what Mother Nature's about to release. So as we look and we pay attention to these priorities, they are actually indicating what type of measures or actions that we should have to be prepared for what's about to knock at our front door. When we see this warning, that means that, hey, whether you're ready or not, company's coming. Mother Nature's about to release a visitor, and that, based upon this winter segment we're talking about, is going to be your freezing temperatures or your frost, snow, blizzards, and heavy snowfall or flooding. So get ready or not, as we would say. Here it comes. And what we don't like to do is, when we hear the warnings, our face is this. We take on that, oh, my conditions are changing. I'm not going to be able to go outside. It's not going to be normal. And some of us, like me, when that type comes, I get the baby face. Don't want to have to deal with this, but it's something we're going to have to deal with. So as we take these things and adhere to these warnings and these priorities, they're getting us ready, especially you farmers who have to make adjustments with all the things you take care of, your animal, your livestock, your farm, your family, your farm, even yourself, and even the exchange and all the different things you may need to prepare for the upcoming season. So these are things that you want to watch out that are key. Another thing is, because we're going to be talking about weather and weather preparation, because it's right around the corner and you're in November looking at this, you want to understand that these are things that will be priority to watch out for. One are these blizzards. Now, blizzards are a different kind of situation, because above all the particular winter storms is the one that's the most dangerous because of the things that it has, it's combined with. It brings low temperatures that can fall and fluctuate so quickly, drop so many degrees within a matter of time, heavy snowfall that comes with it, as well as high winds. So you take those three key elements. You're dealing with low temperatures, you're dealing with snowfall, and you're dealing with wind blowing. It can create a very chaotic moment for you and the livestock and the things that you're handling. As well as when we deal with heavy snow storms, we have to understand that in a matter of 12 hours that you can accumulate, based upon the actual wind base, 4 to 8 inches within a 12 period hour. Now that's pretty radical, but definitely 4 is common, 6 could be. But when we get into these major winds or blizzards, or things that are coming with heavy snowfall, you can get up to 8 inches in some type of historic moments, and even from 6 to 12 in a 24-hour period, because the fact is that the winds, you can't calculate the actual snowfall or the actual precipitation in the clouds and how it's going to drop and come down and bring us a snow cover. Now, when we're dealing with ice storms, because we're dealing with the moisture that's coming or falling from the clouds. The earth has gotten cold, it's cooling itself, and it's like a refrigerator. So when the actual rain and moisture hits the ground, everything begins to turn into ice, and immediately it's impacted and brings hazardous conditions to you and even the livestock and those things that you're taking care of, as well as those who may not be over a farm and watching this. You have to be careful, because when it actually comes, when this ice hits the ground, it is a place that makes immobility, and it becomes hazard to all. We don't want to see anyone hurt or break a leg or sprain an ankle, nor do we want to see an animal be able to come into a place where it receives an injury as well. Heavy snowfall is the next one. It's very dangerous to animals, of course to people, but because of the situations that it brings, we have to look out for those frozen troughs and those things that propel and give the animals actual water, but they can be frozen or overcome or snow fed, or your snow snow covers your actual feeding troughs or feeding bunkers and overcome them. Your pastures, they're being made or led, not allowing the animals to be able to eat or graze because they're covered with snow. What can this do? It can actually affect the animals, malnutrition and dehydration in the animals. So basically, these snowfalls are dangerous because, one, it can bring actually heavy snowfall, making it impossible or hard for you to take your equipment to get out to them, to get to them and be able to change things. So these things are things that can impede your processes, but we have to know that Mother Nature makes no discrimination. She delivers what she delivers. So we want to be wise and we want to be prepared as we go into this season with preparation. Next thing we want to talk about is fires, because fires are something we really don't normally look at in the actual winter, but it's something we have to pay attention to, because if the temperatures drop and we get into freezing temperatures, the things and the lines that we have that actually give us water, firefighters and those who might come out in the county to be able to help us be able to overcome those fires, they might not be accessible, or the lines might be frozen, or with great snow falls, it may not be able to get to you. So one of the things you want to do is be able to be prepared for those things that bring these hardships that will cause us to be in a place where we're not being able to easily access the things that help us with the emergency, or it turns into a disaster from emergency. So fire is one of the things we want to do and look at. The other thing we want to make sure of as we get into flooding, we get these great massive amounts of snowfall and they're covering, is when the temperature warms and we get into the water releasing, melting. You want to clean out your gutters. You want to move the debris, the branches out of the way so that water doesn't come back or store and back up into your farm or back into the area where your livestock is, or come into the place of your home, or ruin the property because you wasn't able to remove some of the clutter of the leaves from your gutters. So, and that also because of the high water rising levels, you need to know where they are, especially and those who have livestock, making sure that your livestock come into higher ground, and those kind of making those kind of dramatic actions. So in that, we're preparing for winter, and we want to make sure that these things are actually considered as we get ready. So what does preparedness look like when we're talking about being prepared for what Mother Nature brings? And so in preparedness, one of the things that you want to do is that you want to take actions before the winter comes. You're already calculating, you're coming to the end of the season, you've already stored, you got to put up your equipment, you got to put your hoses up, you got to put certain lines, you got to put certain equipment up, your irrigation has to be right, you're storing, you're putting your equipment down for the winter, storing it up. So these things are very critical to get ready for the release of the winter, but making sure that we monitor the conditions and basically going forth to make sure that the insulation that we need, whether it's in our barns or in our houses, or covering areas where cracks or where wind can get in or rain can get in, and just securing those areas to make sure that we lessen the opportunities for those things to affect what we have by making sure we take the right procedures to protect the animals, the property, and yourself, and ensuring that actually your family members know how to operate certain equipment that you're used to doing on just a daily basis. You want to make sure they're empowered, so just in case you're not mobile or able to, that they know what to do. Another thing that you want to do is make sure you keep them informed about and stay informed about the drastic changes in the weather. And I'm grateful that you farmers do that, but those who may not be farmers or non-farmers, you want to make sure that you actually take and keep up with the weather and be prepared for situations to rise on the moment. Being prepared for isolation. Being prepared for an isolation is a big thing. If you actually get into a situation where there's a severe storm, you could basically be isolated and kept away for 2 weeks, depending on the actual nature of the disaster. So you want to make sure that you're in a place. Having fuel on hand, making sure that you have plenty of fuel to be able to heat your homes and take care of those things just in case the power failure goes out. You're able to stay warm and secure and continue to have lighting, and maybe by having those things and keeping those generators running. Another thing would be being prepared. One room. If you get shut off, the power goes off, what room in the house will be able to keep you warm? What have you done to prepare that room? Just that one room, that is a place that you can be able to stay warm for several days, just in case help can't get to you. So you want to consider that. Another thing you want to do is to make sure that, as I said before, making sure that your family's aware where things are, where keys are, where the equipment is, where is the actual fuels at, making sure that they understand how to operate just in case you're not in a position to be able to help them. And the last thing on this in preparedness is a big one, is making sure that you have proper ventilation for you and the animals. So one of the things you want to make sure is that if it's something that you use fuel that does not normally take in fuel, that you don't use it during a critical situation and it's not designed for fuel to use it, do not use it. Another thing is burning charcoal inside the home. That gives off definitely deadly carbon monoxide. And also making sure that if you're using propane, you want to make sure you have an actual area that's actually has air coming in and going out so that you don't get sick, or worse than that, you come up and something critical happens or fatal happens because of that. Let's get into survival kits. These are things that basically the basic supplies that one should have when getting ready for an actual situation that may arrive. One thing we want to talk about is water. A lot of times when we talk about water, it's said that we should have at least 3 days or up to a week. But one of the things we do know is that a person can drink a gallon of water a day. So you should have a gallon of water per person per day, stored away for an emergency situation. Next thing is food. They say normally from 3 days to 2 weeks worth of food. You want to get in your dry goods, your canned goods. Those will actually be good to you during a situation where you actually need food and you're not able to get around or circulate, but you actually have those things on storage and you're able to access them when you're needing them in a very vital moment to be able to make sure that you and your family actually are taken care of. Flashlight is also something that can be very critical in the moment when there's no power, when you need to be able to go out and see in the darkness so you don't stumble or hurt yourself over anything. Not only that, when you're connecting things, you need that light. A flashlight can also indicate to someone where you're located or where you are. Matter of fact, I like to say sometimes even these glow sticks are really good. You break them, they can indicate from a distance because of color where you're located. Someone can see them or you can leave them and someone knows you're in that location or that area, but also they make good just to be able to identify or let people know as a hazard, hey, I'm here. So making sure you may have some of those. Another thing that's very important is something I want to show you that I think is a very unique tool today is your old school, your crank up battery power operating radio. Now, why this is important? Because it's also solar. It has a solar panel on it. You can put it out in light. It can actually charge. But what happens when you don't have power to charge your phone? These particular new things, or they're not so new, but they actually do crank up and charge your battery to an actual some bars to be able to make a call to get through. You actually have your radio on so you can still hear what's going on. It's keeping you in tune. It's keeping your power, and you're not powerless, but you're in a position that you can still go out and find out what's going on and make calls or be able to receive calls or texts to be able to keep up with family and other emergency personnel if needed. So these crank up actual radios is something you ought to have and put in your arsenal to have if you need it for a situation that may arrive. And so in that, batteries, extra batteries, making sure you have those, and making sure you just have a family duplex first aid kit. That's your band-aids, your swabs, your peroxide, your gauze, those things that are needed, scissors and gloves, just in case someone scratched themselves or hurt themselves, they don't get infection. You're able to do that and help them. Basically, because we're talking about a winter situation, you might not be able to get there. I remember a time that my son, we lived in a rural area, and we had about, I think it was like 14 inches of snow, and he was a young kid at the time, and he had a febrile seizure, and they could not get to us. And at that point, we basically went bizarre because we didn't know what was going on with him, and he was having this fever, and it caused a seizure because his temperature was too high. And I understand what it's like to be able to need personnel, but you can't get them, and you have to do everything you can to be help until help arrives. And that's one of the sayings when they talk about disaster. You are the help until help arrives in a disaster moment. The other thing you want to be able to look at is this. Medications is very important because a lot of people do not supply or put up supplies of things of diabetics or high blood pressure or any type of medication that you're on, even pain pills. And if you run out and you're actually in the house, you might not be able to get to it. A multi-purpose tool that was like it has all types of different things on it. It has scissors. It has something to puncture glass. It has something to cut. It has something to screw. Those kind of multi-purpose tools. The sanitation and personal hygiene, you know you need that. And basically taking your personal documents and putting them in a secured lock bag or a secured thing that's fire and waterproof. When it comes to family needs and family supplies as far as emergency kit, you definitely want to be able to have your phone chargers. You want to put those and make sure they're accessible. You want to have your emergency family contact information, who to call or neighbors to call in case of these emergencies. And you might definitely want to make sure you have extra cash, because if things are down, systems are down, you want to make sure you have monies to be able to sustain or buy in an emergency situation where you're not able to go get money from something that's close goes down, but you have it yourself. Emergency blanket is one of the things I have. These emergency blankets are really cool. They keep you, they're thermal. They're something for one person, but they will retain heat and body heat. They're very inexpensive, but you want to get these and have these on hand. It will keep you very, very warm in the time when there's no heat. The other thing you want to have is maps of the area. If you don't, that's something you know, or know the area very well, and rehearse in your mind what you want to do. Again, making sure for the medical supplies such as hearing aids and batteries and glasses and lenses, these things that are very critical and important to the person who may need them, and they might have a vision problem, but they need to make sure they have that on hand. The other thing is baby supplies. We don't really talk about that, with the baby formula or baby diapers or baby food or things stored up for the baby, just in case we're getting a situation we're not able to get to anyone. And you want to be able to have games and things that occupy and activities for the children, so that they will be able to weather the storm, as we say, so that they won't get a brutal Mother Nature occurrence from you. But you want to make sure that you actually have these games and these things and activities to be able to give them wholesome events and activities to stay structured. Pets, you want to make sure you have your supplies with their collars or leashes, as well as cats and as well as those cats and bowls. Two-way radios if you have the opportunity, and then basically something we don't look at is another extra set of keys, and making sure we have a place where keys cannot be moved. It's a secure place, a place we need just in case something gets blown away. We still have another place to be able to find it, or place that it is. And a manual can opener, critical in the time of disaster and storm. Another thing we want to look at is the additional things, such as for your home, the survival kits, based upon the type of actual disaster it is. A whistle. A whistle is very important because it goes further than your voice, and the pitch of it carries for a long time. It can go very far away. So you want a whistle. Now we have these common things that are part of our actually daily outfits, is the N95 surgical mask. We never thought we'd be wearing them, but because of COVID, they're here. We have to wear them all the time, or some kind of face covering, or to keep debris, or to keep germs out, and those things are important. Masks and matches. Matches can be very critical in the time when you need heat or fire. Rain gear to keep the water off and to be able to keep other things off. Towels that are accessible. Work gloves is something you want to have on hand. Tools and supplies that are securing your home. You want those around. And extra clothing, especially for those who are farmers, hats and sturdy shoes. They say a farmer are those who go out and work in the weather. You should dress like an onion, layers on, layers off. So you want to make sure that you're well protected for the conditions that you may have. Plastic sheeting to keep heat in, to keep rain off, or to cover something. You want to make sure you have plastic there. And our great friend, duct tape. Mr. Duct Tape is really good. He tapes up, sticks things, put things together, keeps things together, binds things, and definitely be able to help secure things. Scissors and basically household bleach, because you want to purify, or you want to clean things, or you want to sterilize things. You want that. And also entertainment, just items for the home, just in case you get locked in for a long time, blankets and sleeping bags. These are some basic survival things you want in your kit for your home. Now let's talk about those things that deal with the actual animals and disasters for your livestock that are going to be critical and important for that. When you get into preparing for a disaster for livestock, and I'm just going to be basic and general on this, you're preparing to get livestock. You want to make sure that you prepare to have a livestock evacuation kit, and what that considers and basically should be in that is feed and water, basically your supplements and your medications for them, maybe even your veterinarian records that might be needed for the ownership to prove them, just in case something happens, you get disconnected or the animal ends up somewhere else. And basically ensuring the contents, basically especially the feed and medications are basically fresh and not out of date. Also, when you plan this, you will plan what to do. What will you do in the emergency? This is a big area, because how do you evacuate? What is your evacuation plan? What did you put together? What type of disaster is it? What kind of stability of what you'll need as far as shelter? Where will you go for help? Basically, or where will you go? What friends have you contacted? Who have you set aside as relatives to help out? Basically, what will you do? What type of livestock do you have? How will you move move that livestock wherever you go, fairgrounds, or have you actually have a livestock evacuation locations that you've already determined, just in case the disaster comes, and you can move them based upon the type of disaster it is. Also, you want to be able to know how you'll be able to transport those actual animals if you needed to. So these are things that you should be thinking through and planning for. And basically, if you're not home, what is your plan if you're away from home? Have you designated a neighbor or a neighbor farmer or someone who's familiar with your livestock, or someone who understands your evacuation procedures or procedures in general, or your evacuation kits for them, where they're kept at, and do they have the actual emergency contact information to get a hold of you and to others just in case you're separated? And basically also how to be able to identify the livestock that was yours that might have gotten away. Basically identify them with an ear tag or land bag or a tattoo or some type of identification process or system. The other thing you want to do is stay informed of what type of emergencies that are coming. You know how that is, just looking out so you can make the special preparation and basically thinking ahead and making sure that you're making the proper measurements to be able to secure them. Building strong shelter, we understand that the building a strong shelter basically is to protect them from high winds and those things, that heavy snowfalls, heavy rains, to keep them dry, to keep them away from the moisture and flooding and changing it out and making sure they have enough space. Basically, the rule of thumb is that they should have 4 times of space of their body size. When we talk about the adequate food and water, basically, if you're not able to reach them, have you basically put away food that maintain them for a couple of days while you're away? If the temperature drops, have you gone out and broken up the ice and replaced the frozen water and just putting heating elements in to make sure that they're able to get to it? For bedding, are you taking the right precautions to be able to, if there's a blizzard, to change out, to add more hay, to change out the actual the hay, the bedding for them based upon how frequent it needs to be actually replaced? If it's dealing with the adequate cooling option, basically just making sure that if they're in a heating element and they're closely packed together, that you have adequate water to handle the heat that is around them, and also giving them the proper ventilation, that air can come in and air can circulate among them. And when we also just talk about the food, checking and having the safety of the farm, you just basically randomly going to your periodically checking on the property lines, checking on fence lines because of storms, checking on your roofs, checking on all the different things that will cause you not to be able to suffer loss. These are just some basic things that you ought to consider as you go forth to be able to prepare for the future. I do want to say to you, if you want a list of that, I do have a list that I can get you from the USDA, Department of Ag. Just email me or put it on there that you want this. We'll be able to get this to you, email it to you. And if not, go to ready.go, and that'll be able to get you that also. We'll be able to help you be able to have these particular lists. Let's talk about the other element that's coming up. One of the big ones now is COVID-19. In Kentucky, now this date and time will change, but as of October the 12th, in Kentucky, majority of our counties have actually are tested positive. Basically, we can see the total tested is over 1,697,000, and basically we've had positive cases basically over 80,000. I'm sure by the time we look at this within a couple of days or more, this number will fluctuate and be extremely higher. But COVID is its own animal, it's its own germ, it's its own beast that we're dealing with, and so it's something that has not just affected us, it's affected everything around us. The way you do business, the way you shop, the way you handle your hired hands, the way you deal with being able to get supply, even yourselves. Most farmers are used to being isolated and alone, but in this, because of this COVID, that's not with Mother Nature, but it's its own element. It's created this whole new way how we have to do things and how we have to regulate and prepare to be able to handle markets, or prepare to be able to get supply, or how we intervene or act with people. So let's talk a little bit about this, because this is the new beast that's rose up that we have to be able to overcome. So one of the things we want to do is, according to the Center of Disease and Control Prevention, one of the biggest things is we need to continue to remember to know how COVID spreads and what it does and how it does. One of the things that we understand is that there is no current cure or anything that's created right now that actually has been really proven or marketed to the point that it handles the COVID-19. The best thing to do is avoid contacts from the virus. So being able to do that, staying away and avoiding people, avoiding the situations. And one of the things we want to do, we understand that it's actually spread from person to person. And these are a few things that we need to understand. Basically, we need to continue to stay at 6 feet, because the 6 feet boundary is how it reaches us, basically breathing in or touching or some way or another, getting to our eyes, mouth, and through our hands and getting to our nose. It's when respiratory drops are produced, when an infected person coughs or sneezes or talks, these things are released and it's in the air, and we can touch it and bring it to ourselves. But these droplets can land on the mouth or nose of the person or a nearby person when it's held into the lungs, creating a situation where the body now is under attack, and it's based upon the immune system, whether or not it can handle it, or any pre-existing conditions that it can overcome or siege in the person's health. Some studies have shown that this is basically that people can have it and not show any conditions. So it is that silent creature that we're trying to figure out how to overcome and how to continue to maintain, to stay away from, so we can stay away from the effects of this pandemic that can become disastrous to us all. But here's a few things as far as the safety tips of being able to handle the COVID. One is, when you're going out, because you're going to be dealing with businesses going in and out, is making sure that you make a list prematurely and knowing prior to going out, to know the things that you're going to do, so you don't have to spend a lot of time in locations hanging around folks and being in a situation where there's populace of people coming and going and germs may germinate or be there or waiting or in the air. So basically making sure that you make your list. Second thing that we hate, or we have to be, some of us don't like, but we have to wear masks and being able to cover our faces and keep those things from our mouths and nose, whether it be some type of handkerchief or some kind of covering, or the mask, the N95 or mask at large, just to cover our faces so it doesn't enter into our body. That's a big deal, especially when you're going out to these places that you're shopping or you're doing business or exchange. We talked about cash earlier, the exchange of money having stuff on it. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing is knowing your safety of your hands, washing your hands. We know that you ought to wash them thoroughly over and back, making sure that soap is over the whole hand, making sure you're spending time with the water, under the water for the amount of time appropriated, night over 20 seconds or so, or just making sure you're thorough washing, a thorough cleansing, and making sure you get under the nails and making sure that your skin has totally been washed all over your hands, especially if you're touching a lot of things and you're in a very public place. Staying and observe, really trying to do your best to stay away from and not being around large crowds or overcrowded areas. So making sure you plan out where you're going, knowing your time frames, especially those who are seniors and those who are seniors with age, and those who are having preconditions of sickness. You want to make sure you're planning your steps and planning them well, avoiding these areas because of the spread and the possibility of spread. The other thing is choosing pre-bagged items, making sure that these items that you actually have, they're already put up. You can call places, they can actually pre-store them, they can actually prepare them. And in that situation, you're making sure you have gloves and you're using these things where there's a high volume of people coming through a particular area or a specific location or store. That's going to help. Avoiding using cash is a big thing because of the passing of germs on hand to hand, especially in the arenas that most farmers do. We want to get into using the systems that are there and try to avoid being able to use a lot of cash in hand because of the fact of the actual having or being able to carry the host of the COVID-19. You want to be able to use more things that will be able to create a limited or limit the access of intervention or reaction or being exchanged with people. That way you'll be able to do that by these commerce systems or being able to use your debit cards or other things of that nature where you don't have to have that kind of contact. The last thing is getting tested. You know where your testing sites are. If you have any symptoms or when in question, make sure you check. And last thing is staying quarantined. If you have anything you think that is coming up or someone around you, stay low, stay to yourself. Make sure you follow the guidelines on being quarantined. Last thing is getting tested, as I said, and making sure, as we say, staying quarantined by yourself, spraying everything, staying away from things. So at this point, I'm done with presenting the information I had. I hope that there was some information and things that were said that will cause you to have a greater awareness. Prepare your kits, prepare your activities, make your plans, get ready to make evacuation. Mother Nature's coming, winter's on its way, and hey, COVID's all around. So there's a tag team that's going around us, but we're prepared to be able to minimize loss and to minimize the actual casualties by being able to take these prepared steps. So at this time, we appreciate you. Again, hey, let's continue to try to stop COVID together. Appreciate you. Gil Finley, Kentucky State University.